From the Trade Collective, Ms. Lebohang Pheko. A very good afternoon to you, ma'am. Thank you so very much for joining us here on SABC News.
Thank you.
A lot of points made. Before we talk about the moral authority of the U.S. at this point and whether or not the U.S. has indeed been discredited, I want to talk about the points yesterday that were made by Trump's attorneys as I watched the impeachment trial getting underway. There were very many interesting arguments. One indeed implying that there would be nothing stopping other former U.S. presidents from being impeached if precedent was set if Trump was indeed impeached. Does this argument hold much water? And would there be any reasons really for some of the former presidents to be up for impeachment themselves?
I think it's quite difficult given that one cannot look retrospectively, and given that only two former presidents have been impeached previously, and then that's Andrew Johnson and of course Bill Clinton, and then Richard Nixon, who then resigned before he could effectively be impeached. So he jumped before he was pushed to all intents and purposes, and for very different reasons. So Andrew Johnson was around the Civil War and his own insistence that Tennessee should not be part of integrating into the United States and so on. So I mean, there's a context to that. His own party, in fact, members of the opposition voted to save him, his political life. Of course, Bill Clinton were aware of the dress, Monica Lewinsky, and so on. And basically what was argued there was that his misdemeanors were morally reprehensible, but per se not politically derelictus. So he hadn't per se acted in dereliction of his political duties. And of course, now we see with President Trump, I think that it's occurred in fast motion. In live action. And I think what we can see here is that there are several things. And the one that stands out, I think, in this instance versus the others is that it does seem to reach to fulfill the obligation or the legal obligation of legal requirement that it is seen as having caused an insurrection, an attempt to displace a sitting government, and of course an attempt to completely undermine the constitutional conclusion of the elections in the United States. So the other thing is that there's no consistency per se in the sorts of actions that have been brought. But I really don't think, I think that 4 presidents in 300 and what years should illustrate that it is quite difficult to gather both the political and the political willingness and the public willingness. And then many of these things come down to political will rather than legal argument.
Yeah. And then let's move to the issue of moral authority of the U.S. Can they continue to act as the authority on many issues? You know, whether we're talking about governance or even elections. You know, they're usually the first to talk about other countries. Smooth transition to democracy, the fair and fair elections. And I just wonder, after everything we've kind of observed, yes, okay, indeed, Biden is in office now, and everything seems relatively going smoothly at the moment, but I wonder if the U.S. can still continue to be this authority that they themselves consider themselves.
Yes, I think you raise an important point, Flo. They consider themselves. I'm not sure whether the rest of the world per se has considered this with them. I think that when we look at the checkered history of U.S. intervention in other countries, it is completely at odds with their own democratic principles. They do and have invaded different countries, regime change, calling for different shifts. CIA, of course, have been implicated in the assassination and the removal of Patrice Lumumba. I mean, these are not fringe conspiracy theories. I mean, they were also complicit in the removal of Thomas Sankara, Maurice Bishop, Noriega across South America. So, we saw that the way the U.S. brand of democracy abroad is completely different to what it ingests on home ground. So I've always been of the view, and I think many people who, many global Southern scholars like myself would probably be of the view that America has probably never had moral authority. What America has a loud voice. They have a lot of money. So what they've been able to do, of course, is to by influence inside institutions which do purport to promote global governance, such as the United Nations, where they've got disproportionate voting power, and so forth. So this is where they've been able to derive the semblance or the illusion that they themselves actually hold to these democratic moral ethics, when in fact they do not. And in fact, also the whole notion of U.S. democracy, if we look at the ways in which Black citizens, African Americans on home ground are treated, we can see that even on home ground, U.S. democracy and the American dream is not applicable to all citizens equally.
All right. Thank you so very much for giving us your time. We'll certainly be catching up with you as the impeachment trial sort of gains momentum and we get more out of it. Thank you for giving us your time.